What is going on, guys? DragonTamerBlayde here, back from our Elder Scrolls Legends, and today we're going to be going through some more Alliance War card reviews. I've definitely fallen behind quite a bit, so we're going to do one or two more cards than usual just to try and help us catch up a little faster, but we're still going to need at least a couple of these in a row in order to catch up. Real quick before we get started, if you're new to the channel, or if you haven't subscribed yet, definitely hit that subscribe button and follow me on Twitch for all your Alliance War news and daily Legends content. And we've been streaming a couple times a week if you haven't come over to the stream yet. I think we've been having a pretty good time. But that's enough shameless self-promotion on my own channel. Let's get on into the reviews. Starting back, I think we're almost a week now, but not quite a week back. I think it was Monday with Charmer's Reveal. And it is right here. It is Sparksmith. I almost said Sparky Smith. 4 cost 4/4 red guard. Whenever a friendly creature equips an item, deal 1 damage to your opponent. So there's a couple things to keep in mind. It is guaranteed to be your opponent's face. It does not have to be this creature that gets an item equipped. And yeah, 4/4 for 4. It's not great, but it's perfectly serviceable for a decent ability. The ability does help trigger empower effects. That 1 damage over and over again can quickly rack up, especially if you have 0 cost items or cost reduced items with things like skilled blacksmith. We've already seen a similar deck that I think this card fits really well in the Dragonstar OTK deck. One of the biggest problems with that deck was you can usually draw a whole bunch of cards because you're getting a bunch of 0 cost, maple shields and steel daggers and stuff like that going onto Dragonstar Rider. But if you didn't roll like charge with your Arcane Enchanter, the deck didn't really have a way to win, even despite it drawing through most of the deck at any given moment. So now, Sparksmith gives you a way to deal a whole bunch of extra damage and potentially even have an alternative way of winning in that deck. Even just in a regular, mostly aggressive, like items battle mage type of list, being able to just equip a bunch of items and still push extra face damage. Like, even if you play this card and you equip, let's say, Cloak and Dagger, that deals 2 damage to your opponent's face, and you're equipping the items anyway. So it's just bonus damage on top of it. There's also pretty good synergy with a card we'll be revealing towards the end of the video that I revealed yesterday on YouTube, the card Salvage. Being able to recycle a bunch of items and maybe play, let's say, for example, 9 to 10 steel daggers for free and deal 10 damage to the face could be pretty darn good in a specific deck. That being said, this card needs to be in an item-focused deck if you really want to get value out of it. You don't want to just play this as a 4/4 for 4. If you're playing, let's say you're a deck that just plays Dawnbreaker or just plays 3 Steel Scimitars, you're probably not going to want Sparksmith in your deck. However, if you are a deck that's item-heavy, you can get some pretty solid value out of this card. So for that reason, this is going to be a 3-star card. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of power that this card has in potential. However, it requires a very specific deck to be built around it. And I think it's the type of deck that could make Dragonstar OTK a bit more consistent of a deck, and some other items decks a little bit better. But like I said, this is more of a supplemental card in those decks that needs to be built around. Still a strong card, though. 3 stars is nothing to shake a stick at. Next up, we've got Imperial Lackey, some token synergy we had revealed. It's a 2 cost 2/2 with the Last Gasp ability. If you have another creature in each lane, summon a 1/1 recruit in each lane. So essentially, this guy's Last Gasp is if you have another creature in each lane, cast Scouting Patrol. Is that good? Yeah. If you're playing a tokens deck, which is where this guy's going to shine, you could attempt to play him in like a regular mid-range or aggressive deck. But I think he's at his best in a tokens deck. And getting a card in each lane is pretty easy. You've got Marked Man that'll do it for 1 Magicka. You've got Scouting Patrol that'll do it for 1 Magicka. You got the Pack Wolf, I think, that can do it for 2 or I think it's 3 Magicka. There's a whole bunch of different ways to get this done very cheaply. And usually as a tokens deck, you're going to have cards in each lane by turn 1 or 2, which is when you're going to be playing Imperial Lackey. And assuming you play him on turn 1 or 2, he's going to die by turn 2 or 3. And at the end of the day, as long as you satisfy that effect, you're getting 4/4 worth of stats for 2. And that's not counting tokens decks are very commonly going to be playing Orc Clan Captain, or they're going to be playing 5th Legion Trainer, maybe have a Divine Favor on the board. So that 4/4 worth of stats can very quickly turn into 6/4 worth of stats, 7/4 worth of stats, all the way up to, if you have like Divine Fervor out, you get a 3/3 and 2/2/2s, you're getting a 7/7 worth of stats. This card is amazing for tokens decks. It gives them a solid tradable body in the early game, and also kind of refills your board instantly after dying, as long as you can satisfy this pretty easy effect. Obviously, his best use is kind of limited to tokens decks, but traditionally we've seen a lot of powerful tokens decks over the years, and this also kind of pushes more towards a Imperial tribal type of token spell sword, if tribal ever gets more support in that front. But even still, just this is another card that pushes token spell sword into being even better. Traditionally, tokens have been quote-unquote better in Crusader and in Mage, but getting a card like this in the early game that kind of continues to spread out your board and synergizes with your buffs and your existing tokens, and even things like General Tullius or Clivia Tharn, if you're playing that type of deck. This is just a really good card. I'm going to give this card 4 stars. Obviously, the effect is dependent on the meta, so I'm not saying he's going to be good at all times, but this is an incredibly powerful card for a tokens deck. And before you say, oh, but he dies really badly to Sorcerer's Negation, most of the game does. You can't judge a card based on one piece of removal. And yes, Sorcerer's Negation is incredibly common, but if he's using Sorcerer's Negation on this, he's not using it on your 5th Legion Trainer or any other of your better threats. And honestly, like I said, most cards die to Sorcerer's Negation. But I like this card a lot. I think this is a really, really good card. Next up, we've got Steel-Eyed Visionary. This was revealed by Game Informer. It's 3-cost, 2/4, with the effect Veteran. Set each friendly creature's power equal to its health. So Veteran is a new keyword that triggers when you swing at your opponent's face, I believe. It has to deal damage. Oh, when it... No, actually, it's just when it survives its first attack. So you either go face, or you have to attack a opposing creature and survive, and that's when Veteran will trigger. This is the kind of card that could fit into certain decks, but my biggest hope for this card is in High Hrothgar decks. I've always said things like Fat Warrior, if you've been around on the channel for a while, or even just high health minions like Cathay Rot Veteran, Riverhold Escort, cards like that, Lurking Mummy, Portcullis, all those high health creatures. It was tough to build a deck around High Hrothgar because A, it's a unique support, it's hard to guarantee that you draw it, so you have a bunch of these low attack creatures that can't really do much for you otherwise. And B, support removal is so common that even if you got that High Hrothgar down, it could easily just get removed that turn before you get any value from it. It's really hard to build a deck around that card. So now Steel-Eyed Visionary, being that it's a non-unique legendary, you can play 3 of these, which now gives you 4 possible ways to trigger that ability. And it's a creature, so you can swing with this. It turns itself into essentially a young mammoth. And if you played Cathay Rot Veteran on 2, or can't remember the vampire's name, the 2-cost 1/5 with Drain, there's a whole bunch of early game cards that you could play, and if Steel-Eyed Visionary swings, turning that vampire into a 5/5, this card into a 4/4, and maybe you had, like, I don't know, I'm just going to throw out a random card, Dwarven Spider, turning that into a 3/3, that makes this card ridiculous. Even just buffing one other weak attack card into a full attack makes this card completely worth it. And it gives you just alternative enablers in those type of synergistic decks. I like this card a lot. That being said, it's a very specific deck build that you need to do in order to get this to go off. And on top of that, answering this card before it gets to a chance to attack, and or making it die on the attack, which will make Veteran not trigger, isn't the hardest thing to do. For that reason, I'd give this card about a 3 to 3.5 star rating. It's going to be in specific decks. It may even drop down to like a 2.5, depending on how common removal is. But I could see that deck being pretty powerful if it got maybe one more enabler. It's pretty close. I think the deck is getting much closer. I think this will be a very powerful card in that deck, and it can turn kind of that deck from being slower and waiting to being able to go off on turn 3 or 4 and have like a board of 2 or 3 4/4s and 5/5s on turn 3 or 4, which I think can be very, very powerful. Next up, we've got Dominion Battlereef. It's a tricolor card, 3-cost 3/3 with Drain, and the ability Summon, Last Gasp, and Slay, deal 1 damage to your opponent. So it's 3/3 for 3, which is, you know, fine. We've gotten a whole bunch of those in Isle of Madness, and some of them are seeing play. But I think it'd be probably too good as a 3-cost 3/4. The Drain ability, 3-cost 3/3 with Drain, that sees a bunch of play at the moment. The card has Prophecy as well, but it's mostly being played for the Drain effect. Early game Drains are quality, and 3 attack is nothing to shake a stick at. And in addition, As long as it doesn't get silenced, even if this card doesn't attack, it's going to deal 2 damage to your opponent's face and heal for 1. Because if it dies on your opponent's turn, the last gasp will not drain, since drain only triggers on your turn. But deal 2, heal 1, and have them answer it is still pretty solid. And whenever it trades, this is why I like this card a lot. If it was just drain, summon, and last gasp, I would like this card a lot. And then it gets the slay effect on top of it, which will A, gain you health, and B, also deal damage to your opponent and gain you more health. So you've got the obvious empower synergies. You've got just continuous little pings. Even if you trade 1 time, kill 1 creature, and all 3 of these trigger, this is a 3-cost, deal 3 damage to your opponent and kill at least 1 creature. Like, this card has a chance to be like a mid-range powerhouse. Obviously, consistency will be a thing in this type of deck since it's a tricolor 75-card deck, but this is a really, really strong mid-range card. I like it quite a bit. I would give this card like a 3.5, probably 4 stars to be honest. This card is really good. It can fight for the board, it rewards you for fighting for the board, and it regains your health, which helps against both aggro and mid-range mirrors. It's not the greatest versus a control deck, but at the same time, the pings that it gets in are still not irrelevant, because even if it's dealing, 1 or 2 damage, if it never gets to swing, 2 damage to the face and forcing your opponent to use removal, I think it's pretty quality. I feel more confident in 4 stars for this card. I think this card is going to be really good. Next up, we've got Staff of Ice, a 5-cost item with Prophecy and Mobilize, and it's got +1/+1, and the wielder deals 2 damage. So, just if you aren't already aware with Mobilize, Mobilize is a keyword that if your lane is empty that you want to equip this item in, it will summon a 1/1 token in order to equip this item to. So, if you're using the Mobilize effect, in total this is a 2/2 worth of stats, and it deals 2. So you can kind of think of this card as like a Prophecy Ash Servant. However, it's not just a Prophecy Ash Servant. There's a couple more things to it. Unlike Ash Servant, Staff of Ice can go face, which means if you equip this onto a Pilfer creature, you can trigger your Pilfer synergies, as well as if you're playing, let's say, Doomcrag Sorcerer or something like that. This is similar to Crossbow and Sword of the Inferno. This is a card that can synergize with Lethal for ping kills. So initially when I saw this card, I was like, oh, this card's garbage. This is 1 star. But I think if we've learned anything over the last few months, it's not to overlook cards that can trigger Slay and Lethal and stuff like that on creatures. I know the stats on this are pretty garbage, and it's overcosted compared to Crossbow and Sword. However, it does have Prophecy, which means you can trigger things on your opponent's turn, catch them off guard. So even if they're trying to, let's say, ignore your Arcane Venom Tongue, you can turn it into a kill on your turn. Being able to go face is not irrelevant. We've seen how many times you've died to Prophecy Lightning Bolt. So now if you can get your opponent down to 2, and now you have Lightning Bolts and Staff of Ice in your deck, that doubles your chance of Prophecy Lethal. I think it's one of those cards that seems really bad, but it's something you shouldn't overlook. I'd give this card probably like a 2.5 to 3 star rating. I still think that all of the item ping type effects are still going to be better in strength-based decks, either a Slay Warrior or some sort of Lethal Archer type of thing. However, Staff of Ice existing can maybe allow you to try to do something like Lethal Dagoth, and now you have some more triggers to play on your cards, or maybe some other tricolor combination. You can do like a Slay Ebon Pact, not Ebon Pact, Daggerfall Covenant or something like that. There's a whole bunch of different types of tricolors that Staff of Ice might be able to synergize with. And I think my biggest overall point here is don't overlook the card as being overcosted and garbage stats. I think that's too easy. This is a super flexible card, and it can fit into a lot of different strategies. And I'm okay with it being overcosted if you have that much flexibility. It can slide into a whole bunch of decks and be decent in all of them. I think the biggest question is, will it find a deck where it can be good, not decent? And that remains to be seen, but I think it has a lot of potential. And finally, because I like to try and keep these card review videos in the 10 to 15 minute range, finally we have Salvage, the card that I revealed yesterday. Check out that YouTube video I posted yesterday if you want a bit more in-depth breakdown of this card. But I think this card is, I mentioned yesterday, I think it fits into a lot of decks, but I struggle to find many decks where you want to run it as a 3 of. I think for the most part you're going to want to run 1 or 2 copies, but but I think Salvage is just a really strong card in those decks. I mentioned even just pulling back 1 or 2 Sentinel Battle Maces or pulling back your Dawnbreaker is really, really good in a lot of situations. That could find the reach you need. A lot of times I think you're going to choose between this card and Crucible Blacksmith, and each one has its own times when it's going to be more powerful than the other. But there's combos that you shouldn't ignore with this card. If you get a whole bunch of Steel Daggers in your discard pile, you can play Skilled Blacksmith and Salvage together, draw 10 Steel Daggers that will now cost 0, and now you have 10 reach from your discard pile. Obviously that's an edge case, but even just the common uses of pulling back your 3 Mace of Encumbrance or your 3 Sentinel Battle Mace, if you're playing Slay Warrior, being able to recycle your crossbows and your swords, I think this card fits into a lot of different decks. It's going to be one of those like 1 or 2 of Spice inclusions that can just completely win you the game sometimes. I feel super confident in giving this card 3 stars, but I think this card can push into the 3.5 star range. We're getting a lot of powerful items revealed and a lot of item synergies revealed. So I think a card that can draw potentially 3, or if you use Galen, 3 to 6 cards from your discard pile or copies created with Gardener of Swords. Being able to draw that much from your discard pile, we've seen how powerful using resources from your graveyard is with Odurna and Necromancer and Solitaire over time. This isn't quite as good as those, but I still think this will be very, very powerful. But that's going to be it for today, guys. We have a whole bunch of cards still ready to go that I'll try and get to tomorrow. Let me know what you guys think, what ratings you would give the cards we revealed today, and if there's any synergies that I may have glossed over that you think deserves a better look. Let me know all that stuff down below in the comments section. But yeah, as always, thank you guys all very much for watching. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.